The Resonance of the Scorned, Part 1. The Target. The Arcanum Academy of Oakhaven didn't use wooden targets for its junior combat trials. Wood was expensive, and besides, it didn't scream when it was hit. Elian Vance stood in the center of the dusty amphitheater, his knees shaking beneath his oversized, soot-stained tunic. He was 18, technically an adult, but his mana well, the internal reservoir every mage used to cast spells, was the size of a thimble. In a world where status was measured in kilojoules of magical output, Elian was a pauper. "Position!" barked Instructor Vane, a man whose heart had been replaced by a cold piece of flint decades ago. Around the rim of the amphitheater stood the primes, the wealthy sons and daughters of the High Council. Leading them was Kalen Thorne, a boy with hair the color of spun gold and a smile that harbored the cruelty of a predator. "Don't kill him today, Kalen," giggled one of the girls, balancing a pulsating violet orb in her palm. "We need him for tomorrow's defensive drills." Kalen smirked, his fingers dancing over a sphere of pure, compressed kinetic energy. These were practice spheres, magical projectiles designed to bruise and burn without breaking bones, though in the hands of a prime, they felt like being struck by a runaway carriage. "Position!" barked Instructor Vane. "Begin!" Vane shouted. The first sphere, a jagged bolt of frost blue energy, caught Elian in the ribs. The air left his lungs in a wheeze. He collapsed to one knee, the cold searing through his skin like dry ice. "1 point for the North House," Vane droned. Then came the deluge. Spheres of fire, lightning, and raw concussive force rained down from the stands. Elian curled into a ball, his hands over his head. This was the sacrifice play, a tradition meant to help the elites practice their aim on a moving, reactive target. Elian was the only student in the history of the school to be the target for 4 consecutive years. Why, Elian thought, his vision blurring as a sphere of gravity magic slammed into his back, pinning him to the dirt. Why is the world built like this? As Kalen prepared a massive gold-tinted sphere, his signature solar flare, the world suddenly slowed. The screaming of the students faded into a low, droning hum. A box of translucent neon blue light flickered into existence 6 inches from Elian's nose. Error. External mana saturation detected. Target body, Elian Vance. Status, critical. Threshold for the Great Equalizer reached. Initializing system, the Resonance Engine. "What?" Elian coughed, spitting blood into the dust. 1%. 45%, 100%. System integrated. Welcome, user Elian. Current objective, survive the practice. Passive skill unlocked, kinetic conversion, rank F. All impact damage is now converted into resonance points. Kalen's solar flare left his hand. It was the size of a watermelon and roared like a furnace. The other students gasped. Even Instructor Vane stepped forward, realizing Kalen had put too much power into the throw. The sphere hit Elian square in the chest. There was a deafening crack, followed by a blinding flash of white light. The dust kicked up in a massive cloud, obscuring the center of the pit. "Kalen!" Vane yelled. "I said no lethal-grade spells!" "He's fine," Kalen stammered, though his face had gone pale. He's always fine." As the dust settled, the stadium fell into a tomb-like silence. Elian wasn't dead. He wasn't even unconscious. He was standing, slowly, wiping a smear of soot from his cheek. The blue box hovered before him, visible only to his eyes. Impact absorbed, 4,500 joules. Resonance points earned, 45. Level up. Level 1 to Level 4. New attribute point unlocked. Spend in strength, agility, or mana capacity. Elian felt a strange, warm tingle spreading from his solar plexus to his fingertips. The pain from the frost, the fire, and the gravity was gone, replaced with a buzzing vibration that made him feel like a coiled spring. He looked up at Kalen. For the first time in his life, Elian didn't look afraid. He looked hungry. "Is that all?" Elian asked. His voice was raspy, but it carried to the back of the stands. Kalen's face twisted in rage. "You little rat! You think because you survived one hit you're something! Everyone, release!" A dozen spheres, a rainbow of lethal energy, streaked toward the pit. Elian didn't move. He didn't cover his head. He opened his arms wide. "Warning! High-velocity impact imminent. Engaging resonance buffer." The spheres hit him in a rapid-fire sequence. Boom, 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 boom. To the spectators, it looked like Elian was being obliterated by magical explosions. But inside the smoke, Elian felt a strange sensation. Every time a sphere hit him, he felt a ding in his mind, followed by a rush of euphoria. Level up, level 4 to level 9. Mana capacity increased to average student. Skill learned, mana reflection, rank E. "My turn," Elian whispered. He thrust his hand outward. The swirling smoke around him suddenly crystallized into a jagged spear of pure, white-hot energy, the combined residue of every spell thrown at him. The spear shot toward the stands, missing Kalen's head by an inch and obliterating the stone pillar behind it. The explosion sent the primes diving for cover. Instructor Vane stood frozen, his whistle falling from his lips. Elian looked at his hands, which now were glowing with a faint, pulsing blue light. Tutorial complete. System note: being a punching bag is profitable. Shall we find more bullies? Elian began to laugh. It started as a chuckle and grew into a full-throated, manic sound that echoed off the ancient walls of the academy.
Chapter 2: The Fire in the Library. 3 days had passed since the incident in the amphitheater. The rumors were flying through Oakhaven like wildfire. Some said Elian had made a deal with a demon. Others claimed he had finally hit puberty and his dormant core had awakened. Elian ignored them all. He had spent the last 72 hours experimenting with the system. He discovered that he could scan other mages to see their power levels, and more importantly, he could quest. Daily quest. Knowledge is power. Objective: read 10 grimoires on elemental theory. Reward: +5 intelligence, +1 spell slot. This brought him to the great library of Oakhaven, a place he usually avoided because it was the favorite haunt of the Academy's most brilliant and intimidating student, Seraphina Valerius. Seraphina was the daughter of the Grand Archmage. She was beautiful in a way that felt dangerous, with eyes like molten copper and hair that seemed to smolder at the tips. She was also the only person who had never thrown a sphere at Elian, not out of kindness, but out of complete icy indifference. Elian was tucked into a corner with a book on the fluidity of mana when a shadow fell over his table. "You are sitting in my chair," a cool, melodic voice said. Elian looked up. Seraphina stood there, clutching a stack of scrolls. Her uniform was perfectly tailored, highlighting a figure that had been the subject of many quiet conversations in the boys' dormitory. "There are 80 empty chairs in this wing, Seraphina," Elian said, his heart hammering. The system flickered. Target: Seraphina Valerius. Level: 42, Master Class Candidate. Disposition: curious, annoyed. Note: her mana signature is incredibly dense. Recommended action: do not provoke. Seraphina tilted her head. "You spoke back, and you used my first name. The rumors are true. The target has grown a spine." "I'm tired of being a target. I'm trying out student for a change." Seraphina sat down across from him, uninvited. She leaned forward, her scent, something like cinnamon and ozone, filling Elian's senses. "How did you do it? I watched the recording of the drill. You didn't cast a shield. You absorbed Kalen's solar flare. That's physically impossible for someone with your lack of pedigree." Elian shrugged, trying to look nonchalant while the system screamed at him about her radiant mana pressure. "I guess I'm just a late bloomer," he said. "Liar," she whispered. She reached out, her fingers brushing the back of Elian's hand. Elian felt an electric shock, but it wasn't the system, it was her. Her touch was warm, intensely so. Contact detected, high-grade fire mana. Resonance Engine responding to lust/interest parameters. Warning, heart rate exceeding 120 BPM. System suggests smooth response. What is a smooth response? Elian thought frantically. Prompt, if you want to know my secrets, you'll have to buy me dinner, Seraphina. Elian's eyes widened. I can't say that to the Grand Archmage's daughter. But before he could stop himself, the words tumbled out. If you want to know my secrets, Seraphina, you'll at least have to buy me dinner first. The silence that followed was deafening. Elian prepared himself to be incinerated. Instead, Seraphina's lips quirked with a small, genuine smile. It was like seeing the sun come out during a blizzard. Dinner, she mused. Bold. I like bold. Most of the boys here just stutter and stare at my chest. You're the first one to stare me in the eye and make a demand. She stood up, her eyes flashing. Friday, 7 o'clock, the Obsidian Rose. If you're late, I'll turn your shoes to charcoal while you're wearing them. She turned and walked away, her cloak swirling behind her. Elian collapsed back into his chair, his head spinning. Quest updated. The first date. Objective, surrender to the charm of the Fire Queen without dying. Reward, question marks. I hate this system, Elian muttered, though he was grinning like an idiot.
Chapter 3. The Genius Emerges. The weeks that followed were a blur of rapid growth and social upheaval. Using the system, Elian realized that he didn't need to study magic the traditional way, by chanting and gesturing until his throat was sore. He learned through exposure. Every time Kalen or his cronies tried to ambush him in the hallways with a hex or a sting bolt, Elian would simply stand there and take it. "Why won't you fall down?" Kalen screamed one afternoon, having launched 5 successive thunderclaps at Elian's chest. Elian stood in the center of the hallway, his clothes slightly singed, feeling more powerful than ever. Resonance levels, 88%. Skill learned, Thunderstep, rank D. "Because your magic is delicious, Kalen," Elian said, his eyes glowing with a faint blue light. "Is that all you've got? You're starting to repeat yourself. It's getting boring." Elian flickered. In a burst of static and sound, he appeared behind Kalen, his hand resting lightly on the bully's shoulder. "Don't touch me!" Kalen spun around, swinging a fist infused with stone magic. Elian caught the fist effortlessly. He leaned in, whispering in Kalen's ear. "The next time you throw a sphere at me, I won't just absorb it, I'll send it back with interest. Do we understand each other?" Kalen looked into Elian's eyes and saw something there, a cold, calculating intelligence that hadn't been there a month ago. He nodded frantically and scrambled away. The crowd of students who had gathered to watch the confrontation went silent. Elian Vance, the eternal target, had just intimidated the top-ranked combatant in the school without even casting a formal spell. "Elian!" He turned to see Seraphina standing at the end of the hall. She was wearing a dress of shimmering crimson silk, the Friday night dinner. "Ready?" she asked, her eyes scanning him with a mix of pride and something deeper. "More than," Elian said. Chapter 4. The Obsidian Rose. The heartwarming and the sexy. The Obsidian Rose was the most exclusive restaurant in the magical district, built into the side of a cliff that overlooked the glowing mana fountains of the city. The dinner was surprisingly easy. They talked about things other than magic, about how Seraphina felt the pressure of her father's shadow, and how Elian had spent years watching the world from the bottom of the social ladder. "I used to envy you," Seraphina said, sipping a glass of violet wine. Elian choked on his water. Envy me? I was a human dartboard. But you were free, she said softly. Nobody expected anything from you. I've had my entire life mapped out since I was 5. Every spell I learn, every person I talk to, it's all for the glory of the Valerius line. When I saw you stand up to Kalen, I didn't just see a boy who got stronger. I saw someone who broke their chains. Elian reached across the table and took her hand. This time, there was no system prompt, no calculated move, just a boy who liked a girl. You can break yours too, he said. I can help. After dinner, they walked through the Academy's private gardens. The lunar lilies were in bloom, glowing with a soft silver light that mimicked the moon above. The air was warm, smelling of night-blooming jasmine. They stopped on a secluded balcony overlooking the forest. Elian, Seraphina whispered. She turned to him, her face bathed in silver light. I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who want my power or my father's favor. You're the only person who looks at me. She stepped into his space, her warmth radiating against his chest. Elian felt the system trying to pop up a notification, but he willed it away, pushing the mental UI into a dark corner of his mind. He didn't want the engine right now. He wanted this. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, moving up to tuck a strand of smoldering hair behind her ear. Seraphina let out a shaky breath, her eyes fluttering closed as she leaned into his touch. I thought you were indifferent, Elian murmured, his voice low. I'm a very good actress, she replied. She reached up, her hands sliding behind his neck, pulling him down. When their lips met, it wasn't the explosive, chaotic energy of a spell. It was something deeper, a slow, building heat that started in his chest and radiated outward. The following scene transitions into the requested intimate moment. They moved from the balcony back to Elian's private quarters, a small stone-walled room that he had recently enchanted to be far more comfortable than its original state. The door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the quiet room. In the dim light of a single enchanted candle, the world outside ceased to exist. There were no instructors, no bullies, and no system. Seraphina's hands were bold, roaming over the muscles of Elian's chest, muscles that had become lean and defined through the system's physical corrections. She pulled her silk dress over her head in one fluid motion, standing before him like a goddess made of fire and moonlight. Her skin was a tawny gold, marked here and there by small, faint scars from training accidents, reminders that she too had fought for her place. Elian felt a surge of protectiveness and desire so strong it made his head swim. He moved to her, his hands finding the curve of her waist. He marveled at the softness of her skin, a sharp contrast to the fierce power she usually projected. As they moved toward the bed, the intimacy became a language of its own. Every touch was an exploration, every kiss a promise. Elian was gentle, his movements guided by a deep-seated respect for her, while Seraphina was a storm, her passion matching the intensity of her magic. The air in the room grew heavy and sweet with their shared heat. The friction of their bodies created a static charge that made the very air hum. Elian buried his face in the crook of her neck, breathing in the scent of her, feeling the rapid, frantic beat of her own heart against his. In that moment, they weren't the genius magician and the Fire Queen. They were just two people finding solace in each other, a physical resonance that no magical system could ever truly quantify. As they eventually drifted into a peaceful, tangled sleep, Elian realized that this was the first time in his life he felt truly at home.
Chapter 5. The Twist. The next morning, Elian was woken not by the sun, but by a red flashing notification from the system. Warning: system breach detected. Origin: Academy Headmaster's office. Analysis: the practice spheres were not training tools, they were soul siphons. Elian sat bolt upright, his heart racing. Seraphina stirred beside him, looking concerned. Elian, what is it? The spheres, Elian whispered, his face pale.
Kalen wasn't just bullying me. They were using me to harvest something. He looked at the system log. History. Every sphere that hit the target over the last 4 years drained 0.1% of the target's soul essence. Total siphoned, 94%. Note, the Resonance Engine was not a gift. It was a security protocol created by your ancestors to stop the siphon from killing you. Seraphina, Elian said, turning to her, the headmaster isn't training mages. He's feeding something under the school, and he's used me as the battery for years. Suddenly, the door to his room was blasted off its hinges. Instructor Vance stood there, but he looked different. His eyes were entirely black, and his skin looked like cracked parchment. Behind him stood Kalen, who looked terrified, his hands bound in magical shackles. It seems our battery has become self-aware, and it seems he's corrupted the Archmage's daughter as well. Vane, what is this? Seraphina shouted, reaching for her mana, but she gasped as a collar of black iron appeared around her neck, stifling her flames. The Resonance Engine was a mistake, Vane said, looking at Elian. It was supposed to keep you alive just long enough to finish the harvest. But you've grown too large, Elian. You've absorbed too much. Now we'll just have to take it all back at once. The floor of the room began to glow with a dark, ritualistic circle. Quest triggered. The Great Betrayal. Objective: defeat the Headmaster and his ancient shadow. Reward: true freedom. Elian stood up, naked and unafraid, as the blue light of the system began to pour out of his eyes and mouth. You want my power? Elian's voice boomed, vibrating the very foundations of the academy. Then come and take it, all of it. The blue light radiating from Elian's skin didn't just illuminate the room, it hummed with the frequency of a tuning fork struck by a god. The ritual circle on the floor, etched in oily black ichor, began to hiss as the two powers collided. Warning: resonance overload detected. Current capacity 142%. System note: you're currently a walking magical pipe bomb. It is highly recommended to vent your energy into a suitable target, preferably the one with the punchable face. With pleasure, Elian growled. Instructor Vane didn't wait for an invitation. He raised his hands, and the shadows in the room elongated, twisting into jagged obsidian shards that hung in the air like frozen daggers. With a flick of Vane's wrist, the shards streaked forward. Elian didn't dodge, he didn't have to. As the shards entered his immediate radius, the system flared. Skill activated, kinetic conversion, rank D. Processing. The shards didn't pierce his skin, they shattered against an invisible barrier of vibrating air, their momentum turning into raw blue sparks that flowed directly into Elian's chest. Damage absorbed, 12,000 joules. Mana reservoir, full. Resonance points, 120. My turn, Elian said. He lunged forward, not with a punch, but with a punch wrapped in a turbulent shroud of thunderstep energy. When it connected with Vane's chest, the sound wasn't a thud, it was a sonic boom. Vane was launched backward, through the door, across the hallway, and through the stone wall of the opposite dormitory. Kalen, still bound in his shackles, shrieked and dove for cover as the dust and debris rained down. Elian didn't follow. He turned instantly to Seraphina. She was clutching her throat, the black iron collar pulsing with a sickly purple light that seemed to be drinking her life force. Elian, don't touch it, she gasped, her face pale. It's a void lock. It feeds on any mana that touches it. Target analysis. Void lock. Cursed artifact. Difficulty high. Solution: the system can reverse phase the vibration, requires 200 resonance points and a high degree of physical intimacy to stabilize the transfer. Elian didn't hesitate. He knelt before her, his hands framing her face. Seraphina, look at me. I'm going to pull it off, but it's going to feel like I'm reaching inside your soul.
Trust me." "I trusted you with everything else last night," she whispered, a weak, defiant spark returning to her copper eyes. "Don't stop now." Elian closed his eyes. He channeled the humming, frantic energy of the resonance engine into his fingertips. He didn't push against the collar, he synchronized with it. He felt the jagged, cold rhythm of the void lock and began to vibrate his own mana at the exact opposite frequency. Initiating the great equalizer sequence. Sync rate 10%, 50%, 95%. The room began to shake. The enchanted candle on the nightstand shattered. Elian felt a searing heat in his palms, a pain that felt like holding on to a live wire, but he didn't let go. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers, grounding the circuit of energy between them. With a final ringing chime, the black iron collar shattered into 1,000 harmless flakes of soot. Seraphina let out a jagged breath, collapsing into Elian's arms. Her fire, previously stifled, roared back to life. Her skin grew hot, and for a moment, the room was filled with a scent of ozone and burning roses. "I've got you," Elian murmured, holding her tight. "Level up, level 9 to level 15. New skill unlocked, Soul Bond, passive. You can now share mana with designated partners. System note, your partner is currently plotting murder. I suggest getting out of the way." Seraphina stood up, her eyes no longer copper. They were white-hot pits of magnesium fire. She looked toward the hole in the wall where Vane had disappeared. "He tried to collar me," she said, her voice echoing with a dual-tone resonance. "Nobody collars a Valerius." She raised her hand, and the air in the hallway ignited. A torrent of flame, shaped like a soaring phoenix, roared through the breach. The screams that followed were not human. "We have to go," Elian said, grabbing his clothes and pulling them on with practiced haste. "The headmaster will have felt that. If Vane was just the messenger, the rest of the faculty won't be far behind." They stepped out into the hallway, where Kalen Torn was curled into a ball, weeping. The golden boy of the academy looked like a broken toy. Elian paused, looking down at his former tormentor. The system popped up a prompt. Target, Kalen Torn. Status, broken/siphoned. Note, he was never the villain, just another battery that ran dry. Elian realized then that Kalen's arrogance, his cruelty, had been a byproduct of the siphoning. The school wasn't just taking their magic, it was taking their empathy, their humanity, leaving only the base, aggressive instincts behind. "Get up," Elian said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "He's going to kill us," Kalen blubbered. "The headmaster, he's not human. Elian, I saw him in the basement. He has no heart, just a hole." "Then we'll fill that hole with something else," Elian said. He reached down and shattered Kalen's shackles with a squeeze of his hand. "Go to the lower dorms, find the others, the ones they call the targets. Tell them to get to the Great Hall. Tell the target is calling in his debts." Kalen looked up, a flicker of hope crossing his tear-streaked face. He nodded once and bolted down the stairs. "You're building an army?" Seraphina asked, her flames dimming to a manageable simmer. "I'm building a resonator," Elian corrected. "If the headmaster is a void, then we need to be the sound that breaks him."
Chapter 6. The Undercurrents. The duo moved through the Academy's secret service tunnels, a labyrinth of damp stone and humming pipes that Elian had mapped out during his years of hiding from bullies. These weren't just steam pipes, they were mana conduits, carrying the siphoned essence of thousands of students toward the central spire. Environmental scan complete. Anomaly detected. The mana flow is unidirectional. Destination, the Sanctum Arcanum. Current reservoir of siphoned soul, 890,000 megajoules. System warning, that's enough energy to crack the tectonic plate or wake something very, very old. "Seraphina?" Elian said as they navigated a narrow walkway over a vat of glowing violet fluid. "What do you know about the history of this school? The real history?" Seraphina frowned, her hand trailing along the wall, leaving small, scorched marks. "My father always said Oakhaven was built on a nexus of stability. But looking at this isn't stability. This is a slaughterhouse." She stopped, looking at a series of glass jars lined up along a shelf. Inside each jar was a flickering, pale wisp of light. "Those are memories," she whispered, "the first spells of the students. My father told me they were archived for pedagogical review." Elian stepped closer. He saw a jar labeled Vance E, Year 1. Inside was a tiny, pathetic spark of blue. He remembered that day. He had tried to light a candle and failed, but he had felt a strange warmth in his chest, a warmth that had vanished moments later, leaving him feeling cold and hollow for years. "He stole our wonder," Elian said, his voice trembling with a new kind of rage. "He didn't just take our power, he took the joy of it." He smashed the jar. The blue spark didn't dissipate. It flew toward him, sinking into his chest. Memory restored. The spark of discovery. Permanent stat boost, +10 wisdom. System note. User Elian, the system is reacting to the restoration of your core. I remember this feeling. It feels like home. Elian froze. System, what did you just say? Error. Logic loop encountered. Proceeding to next objective. Elian narrowed his eyes. The system's voice sounded different for a split second, less like a computer and more like a sigh. "We need to break all of them," Seraphina said, her eyes fixed on the hundreds of jars. "No," Elian said, looking at the conduits. "We break the machine. The memories will find their owners." They reached a massive vaulted chamber beneath the great hall. In the center stood Headmaster Valerius, Seraphina's father. But he wasn't the dignified, bearded scholar she knew. He was translucent, his skin shimmering with the same violet energy as the siphoned mana. His eyes were wide, fixed on the spinning void. "Father?" Seraphina's voice broke the silence. The headmaster turned. He didn't look surprised. He looked disappointed. "Seraphina, you were always the one variable I couldn't quite calculate. I hoped your affection for the boy would keep him compliant. A happy battery is a productive one." "You used me?" Seraphina stepped forward, her hands erupting into white-hot blades of fire. "You used your own daughter to keep your battery in place?" "I used everything," the headmaster roared, and the room shook. "Oakhaven is not a school. It is a seal. Beneath this mountain lies the World Eater, a remnant of the first chaos. For 1,000 years, my lineage has fed it the crumbs of student mana to keep it asleep. But the beast is waking, Seraphina. Crumbs are no longer enough. It needs a feast. It needs a resonance engine." He looked at Elian, his gaze hungry. "You are the most perfect vessel ever created, Elian. Your grandfather was a genius. He knew the seal was failing, so he built a way to store the energy, to vibrate it, keeping the beast in a state of perpetual hypnosis." "My grandfather?" Elian asked, his heart hammering. "Archmage Silas Vance," the headmaster sneered. "He died to create the interface you carry in your mind. He thought he was saving you, but all he did was make you the most delicious meal the World Eater has ever seen." Warning, cognitive dissonance detected. Archive unlocked. Project Resonance. Message from grandfather. "Elian, if you are hearing this, the seal is broken. Do not feed the beast. Become the beast's master. The system isn't a cage, it's a saddle." Elian started to laugh. It was a dry, hard sound. "So that's it? I'm not a hero. I'm just the world's most expensive steak." "You're the world's savior," the headmaster said, his voice softening into a manipulative purr. "Just step into the sphere, Elian. Release the resonance. You'll die, yes, but Oakhaven and your precious Seraphina will live for 1,000 years."
Seraphina looked at Elian, her eyes filled with terror. Elian, no! He's lying, Seraphina, Elian said, stepping forward. He doesn't want to save the world. He wants to be the World Eater. Look at his mana signature. Scanning target, Headmaster Valerius. Status, parasitic. Note, he is already 40% merged with the entity below. He isn't feeding the seal, he's eating it from the inside. The World Eater is already gone, isn't it? Elian shouted. You ate it. You've been using our souls to digest a god. The Headmaster's face distorted, his jaw unhinging to reveal a throat that was a literal galaxy of swirling black stars. And I am still so very hungry.
Chapter 7. The Battle of the Spire. The Headmaster didn't use a wand. He simply waved his hand, and the laws of physics in the chamber ceased to function. Gravity reversed, sending Elian and Seraphina hurtling toward the ceiling, while the ground beneath them turned into a churning sea of shadow tendrils. "Seraphina, anchor!" Elian yelled. Seraphina slammed her hands into the stone ceiling, flash melting the rock and fusing herself to it. She grabbed Elian's ankle just as a shadow tendril lashed out, missing his head by an inch. "System, give me something!" Elian screamed in his mind. Current situation, suboptimal. Suggestion, the soul bond works both ways. You are the engine, she is the fuel. Combine. "Seraphina, give me your fire, all of it." "It'll burn you alive," she screamed back. "I have kinetic conversion. I'll turn the heat into frequency. Just trust me." Seraphina let out a guttural cry of effort. She didn't just channel mana, she poured her entire being into the connection. Elian felt it, a tidal wave of white-hot passion, rage, and love slamming into his core. External power source detected. Fire Queen's essence. Resonance level 400%, 800%, 1500%. Warning, physical form cannot sustain this output. Evolving. Elian's body began to glow with a light so bright it turned the shadows in the room to ash. His clothes burned away, replaced with a suit of crystalline vibrating armor made of pure mana. 2 wings of blue and white static erupted from his shoulder blades. He let go of Seraphina's hand and didn't fall. He flew. He moved faster than the eye could follow, a streak of resonance that slammed into the Headmaster. The impact sent a shockwave through the entire academy, shattering every window in the mountain. They tumbled through the floor, falling deep into the dark heart of the mountain, into the literal stomach of the beast. It was a cavern of flesh and stone, where the walls pulsed with a rhythmic, sickly light. This was the World Eater, or what was left of it. The Headmaster stood up, his human form sloughing off like wet paper. Beneath it was a creature of geometry and teeth, a shifting fractal of darkness. "You think a few thousand souls can stop a cosmic predator?" the creature boomed. "I'm not using a few thousand souls," Elian said, landing softly on the pulsing floor. He closed his eyes and reached out his mind. Up in the great hall, Kalen Thorne stood before 500 target students. They were the weak, the scorned, the ones who had been beaten for years. "He's calling!" Kalen shouted. "Can you feel it? The vibration in your bones? That's Vance. He's fighting for us. Give him your spite. Give him your anger. Give him everything they tried to take." Across the academy, 500 students closed their eyes. They didn't cast spells, they simply resonated. Deep in the cavern, Elian felt it, a symphony of 500 voices, a choir of the downtrodden. It wasn't high-grade mana, it was raw, messy, human emotion. And to the Resonance Engine, it was the highest octane fuel in existence. Final skill unlocked. Harmonic convergence, targeting the void.
Elian raised both hands. The air around him began to sing, a high, pure note that forced the fractal creature to its knees. "This is for the bruises," Elian shouted. A beam of pure, harmonic light blasted from his chest, piercing the creature's center. "This is for the memories." Another beam, this one tinted with Seraphina's fire, struck its head. And this, Elian appeared directly in front of the creature's eye, his fist pulled back, "is for my grandfather." The punch didn't just hit the creature, it hit the concept of the creature. The World Eater and the Headmaster who had tried to wear it, shattered, not into blood or bone, but into a trillion tiny glowing blue sparks.
Chapter 8. The Morning After. The sun rose over Oakhaven not on a school, but on a revolution. The seal was gone, but the mountain didn't collapse. Instead, the siphoned mana, now purified by Elian's resonance, flowed back into the students. Those who had been weak suddenly found their cores expanding. Those who had been strong through theft found themselves humbled. Elian sat on the edge of the broken Great Hall, looking out over the valley. He was wearing a borrowed cloak, his body aching in ways he didn't know were possible. System status, dormant. Message: "We did it, Elian. You're a level 100 legend. But between you and me, being a hero is exhausting. I'm gonna take a nap." "Me too, Grandpa," Elian whispered. A pair of arms wrapped around his neck from behind. Seraphina leaned her head on his shoulder, her hair still smelling faintly of smoke. "The council is in a panic. They want to know who the new headmaster is." Elian turned, pulling her into his lap. "Tell them the position is being abolished. We're going to try something new, a school where the targets are for archery, not people." Seraphina smiled, and this time it was a smile of complete, unburdened freedom. She leaned in, her lips brushing his. "I think I can live with that, but first, you still owe me that dessert from Friday night. We never got to the chocolate lava cake." Elian laughed, pulling her closer as the sun warmed the ruins of their old life. "I think I can manage that, but only if the system doesn't try to give me a smooth response prompt." "System? I heard that."
Chapter 9. The New Curriculum. 6 months passed. Oakhaven had changed. The obsidian walls had been repainted in hues of amber and cream, and the Amphitheater of Pain had been converted into a communal garden where students of all grades practiced collaborative weaving. Elian Vance sat in what used to be the headmaster's office, though the door was now always open. He wasn't the headmaster, he was the coordinator. His desk was piled high with scrolls, but his eyes were fixed on a small, translucent blue box hovering in the air. New quest: the diplomacy of the arcane. Objective: convince the Northern Enclave that we aren't a cult of resonance madmen. Reward: a trade agreement for coffee beans and a weekend off. "I'll take the weekend off," Elian muttered, scratching his chin. He had grown a bit of stubble, which Seraphina claimed made him look distinguished, and Kaelin claimed made him look hobo-adjacent. Kaelin Thorne, now the Academy's chief of security, poked his head into the room. He looked healthier, his eyes bright and his posture straight. He no longer wore gold, he wore a simple, functional tunic of reinforced leather. "The delegates are here, Elian," Kaelin said, a smirk playing on his lips. "They look terrified. I think they heard the story about you punching a god into glitter." "It was a demigod, Kaelin. Let's not exaggerate," Elian said, standing up. "And how are the first years?" "Good. We've implemented the Vance method. No more soul-siphoning, just pure rhythmic mana flow. Even the paupers are casting mid-tier shields within a month." Elian nodded. This was his true victory. Not the destruction of the World Eater, but the democratization of power. As he walked down the hallway toward the greeting hall, he passed a mirror. He paused, looking at his reflection. Behind his eyes, he could still see the faint rhythmic pulse of the Resonance Engine. It was quieter now, a steady heartbeat rather than a roaring turbine. "You there, Grandpa?" he thought. Always, Elian, though I must say your choice of tie is abysmal. It lacks resonance. Elian smiled. He reached the greeting hall, where Seraphina was already waiting. She was dressed in a gown of shifting orange and gold, looking every bit the Fire Queen, but when she saw him, her expression softened into something that was for him alone. She walked over and straightened his tie. "The system is right, you know. It's crooked." "I have a lot on my mind," Elian joked. She leaned in, whispering in his ear, "Tonight, no scrolls, no quests, just us." Elian felt a familiar tingle in his chest, not a magical one, but a very human one. "I think I can prioritize that quest." They turned together to face the delegates, the scorned target and the indifferent queen, now the architects of a new world. The story of the resonance of the scorned was no longer a tragedy, it was a symphony, and they were just getting to the best part. Epilogue. The Echo. Deep in the mountain, in the chamber where the World Eater had perished, a single tiny spark of black remained. It didn't pulse with hunger, it didn't vibrate with rage. It sat in the center of the room, slowly turning blue. A voice, old and tired, echoed through the stone. "Well played, Silas, well played." The spark flickered and vanished, leaving behind only the sound of a school full of children learning to find their own rhythm. The end, for now.